Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. And I would like to start because we have a double shift, something like that, with Birmingham. So I will talk about what a clinical trial is and the medical perspective, and afterwards Harriet will do the patient perspective. So these are my disclosures. So what is clinical research? The word clinical stands for that it's research with patients. And if we do clinical research, of course, the patients are very important because without participation of a patient, we can't do this type of trials. But also the government is at play with clinical trials because all clinical trials are highly controlled and highly regulated by our governments. And of course, because of the high costs of drug development, pharmaceutical companies are also very important in clinical trials because I think they will do most of these trials at the current era. So why are these trials so costly? And I want to take you for a quick view at the biopharmaceutical research and the development process. You can see at the basic we have at the left we have basic research. And from basic research, because then we can have some compounds that are perhaps interesting because we understand much more about the disease. These compounds, they can be up to 5,000 in this example. And there you move from this compound drug discovery to preclinical research. Sometimes that's with animals or 3D models or cell lines. And then you try to develop some potential new medicines. And there already there's the big loss. You go from 5,000 potential compounds to 5. And with those 5, you enter the clinical trial stage. And clinical trials, you have different phases that I will explain, but also these clinical trials take a very long time. So it's a median of 9 years. Sometimes some drugs are developed a bit shorter, some a bit longer, but it's a very long time. And all that time, you have to fund all the trials that are being done. And then at the end, you have a phase 3 trial with some positive outcome, we hope, and then you can get to a EMA or FDA approval. That's only one left. So you enter the trials with 5 potential compounds and you end up with one compound that is EMA and FDA approved, and then you can license it and then it can be prescribed to all patients fitting that category. So this is a very long time with high investments. So what are these phases of clinical research? Phase 1 is all about safety. That's the question these trials try to answer. So they are first in human, never tried before in a human person. And it starts with extremely low drug efficacy. And that's important because you want to be safe. So they don't start with the assumed effective dose, but with a lower dose. And then they increase when a patient is dosed, you wait 28 days, and then there's a meeting with all the investigators and the company to see what happened to this patient. Is it safe to move up a dose again? And so the trial ends up with dosing up every time a cohort is cleared, and then there's a lot of measurements done within the patients, and especially how does the drug behave in the patient? How long will it stay inside the body? Because then you will know if you have to dose once daily, twice daily, or perhaps once every week, because there's a very long half-time in a patient. So these are very different, very important estimates to make. The type of cancer is not that important, so the efficacy is not that important, and they're always small trials, up to 80 patients, and I think most patients that participate in these type of trials do it for altruism. They do it because they want to help science or they want to help the next patient with this disease. Phase 2 is also about safety, but then we know much more about the drug, and then we are looking at dosing regimens, perhaps different dosing regimens, and also the efficacy. How effective is this drug? And then, of course, also the type of tumor is more important. And also, are we seeing signals for efficacy? So you have measurements like CT scans or with Waldenström's M protein measurements. These trials are larger, and in these type of trials, everybody gets the experimental medicine in a dose that is supposed to be safe and is supposed to be at least a bit effective. And in current times, phase 1 and 2 trials are often combined in one trial. So when you participate in a trial, you have to ask, am I in which phase is this trial at the moment. And then we have phase 3 trials. And there the question is more, okay, we know so much about the drug now. Is this drug better than we have as standard therapy? It's all about efficacy, but also about safety data and especially also about quality of life. Because with these trials, you can have a better drug, more patients react to the drug. If they respond to the drug, they respond longer to the drug, so longer duration, and therefore perhaps also living longer with your disease. But it can also be a very effective drug, as effective as standard therapy, but you have less side effects. And then also your quality of life can improve. So these are the two questions that can be answered with phase 3 trials. And how to do it is with randomization. So it's not a doctor that can decide which arm you're getting, if you're getting standard or experimental, but it's the computer that's randomizing you standard or control, standard or experimental therapy. And I hear a lot of patients saying, well, I'm not in the trial because I have the standard therapy. But that's not true. You're all still in the trial. You all have to go through all the additional measurements, blood draws, because you're still in the trial and all your information that is collected is important. These are, of course, larger trials, and these trials can lead to registration by the EMA or FDA. So if you are a patient that's going into a trial, of course, you have to know which type of trial you are entering, but there you also have different phases that I would like to explain. First is the screening phase that always starts with signing an informed consent, like signing a contract. And then after you're signing this informed consent, it means that you are really informed. So you have verbal explanation, but also written explanation about the trial. And then after you're signing, then all the tests are done to see if you are eligible for the trial. Do you fit in all the in- and exclusion criteria of this trial? So that's the screening phase, and it normally takes up to 2 to 4 weeks after signing the informed consent before you can start with your treatment. So that's a longer time than normally is when you're not participating in the trial. So this is a treatment phase. You're taking the medicine and you have all your response assessments done. Everything is open, so you will know if you're responding or not to the medicine. And you have, it's a bit like standard care, but there's much more visits, more CT scanning, etc. And then after the treatment stopped, you have the follow-up phase. You're still in the trial. So your data is still being collected. They want to look how long is your disease in remission, how do you go, what is your quality of life after stopping the drug. And this is normally done with standard visits, or it can also be done by questionnaires doing on the phone. So important to realize when you are taking part in a clinical trial, I always explain it as it's more work. So it's like standard care, but much more work. You have to come much more often, more blood is drawn, more CT scanning is done. So more work, more visits, more bone marrow punctures. And you get compensation for all your travels and parking, but not for all the time you invest in participating in a trial. There's also much more information needed in your file. So when you have a complaint, you come to the doctor and say, I had a cold the last 28 days, and then the doctor will have to ask, what day did it start? What day did it end? Did you take any medication for it? So much more information is needed to be written down in your EPD because they want to know all the side effects, potential side effects of a drug with start date and end date. You have rights and obligations in a trial. So the right is that you are, of course, informed, but you can always stop whenever you want to stop. You don't have to give an explanation. So you can stop, just say if you don't feel it's good for you, but you cannot cherry pick. And I mean with that, if you can't say, I would like to have the experimental drug, but I don't like all those bone marrow punctures. That's cherry picking. That can't be done. If you sign up for the trial, try to be try to do all the tests that are required inside the trial. And in my feeling, participating in a trial is like standard of care. So most importantly is that the doctor is taking care of you within the trial as best as they can. So also looking at nausea, diarrhea, infections. So all the standard care is also performed in the trial. So my advice is to patients when you are, for example, newly diagnosed or in remission, but the disease is active again and you are in need of treatment, you can always ask, so what are my standard options? And normally they are published in guidelines, and those guidelines are open. So you can look up the guidelines if you want to. And you can also ask, is there a clinical trial open for my situation? Is there something new in which I can participate? And then, which phase is this trial? If it's phase 3, you know there's randomization. You have mostly a 50% chance that you will get standard treatment. But phase 2, with already 100 patients included, perhaps that's more attractive to you. Are there preliminary data? Sometimes trials take a bit longer, and already at the conferences, ASH or ASCO, some data is already presented. It's in the open, so you can ask about those data from your doctor. And also, is the drug that's being tested already tested in other conditions? And I think a great example are the Bruton tyrosine kinase inhibitors like ibrutinib or acalabrutinib, because those drugs are also, before in Waldenström's, they were tested in mantle cell lymphoma, chronic lymphocytic leukemia. So it's not a very new drug. It was already tested in other conditions. How long will the treatment be? Will it be fixed duration or forever, as long as I can tolerate it or it's working? How is the drug given? Do I have to go to the hospital or can I take it at home? And is there a randomization in the trial? And then for Waldenström specific, because Waldenström's is a rare disease, we don't have many phase 3 trials. And therefore, the FDA and the EMA already registered drugs in the phase 2 part of studies. And especially if there's an unmet need. And with an unmet need, it's meant that you already had all the drugs that are available, normal available to you, but your disease is relapsing again and you are at the current time in need of a treatment. That's unmet need. And if there's a drug being developed, then it's fast-tracked through the FDA and the EMA. At the moment, we only have 2 drugs registered for Waldenström's disease. That's ibrutinib and zanubrutinib. And all the other drugs, like the chemotherapy and the anti-CD20 therapy, the Rituxan, they were tested in non-Hodgkin lymphoma patients in which Waldenström patients participated. But it didn't lead to a specific registration, but we can use it because it's registered for non-Hodgkin lymphoma patients. So there's not often an option to participate in trial, but what you can do is donate to biobanks. And biobanks are banks where we collect bone marrow material and blood from patients and that are being stored in standardized conditions, not knowing what we want to do with it. So we just keep on storing in the hope that from basic research or from the translational research, some great idea comes along and they say, we want to test this on patient material because we really think that we have a great drug in our hands at the moment. And if you start collecting from then you have to wait 5 years. So biobanking is very important to speed up research. And I like the fact that in the Bing Center in Boston, they always ask patients to donate to the biobank. And with that, for example, they made this very important discovery of the MID88 mutation that most of the Waldenström patients have that led to the use of the Bruton tyrosine kinase inhibitors in Waldenström patients, because there was an idea that it would work much better in patients with this mutation. So biobanking is very important. And my last note is, if you don't want to participate in the trial, that is all right. Your doctor will treat you the same. It's never personal to a doctor. So if you don't want to, just say it, and we will treat you as best as we can, nonetheless. And thank you very much for listening.